Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast episode. We are going to be talking about podcasts and how to grow your podcast and some fun tips and tricks we have a podcast coach on. So she's also a network marketer and we're going to dive in. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much, Tia, for having me. My name is Jordan English. I am a mom of two. I'm a wife. I live in Pensacola, Florida, and I am the host of the Life for Me podcast, which I launched about a year and a half ago. I am at like 83 episodes right now, so I'm slowly creeping up to that 100th episode, which I'm so excited about. And I have hosted a podcast workshop in which I am teaching how to consistently create over 48 pieces of content monthly by launching a podcast so that you don't ever have to worry about what to post ever again.
I love that because we all worry about what to post a lot, I'm guessing.
Yes.
And what is that? So what are some tips on that? I'd love if you shared a little bit more.
Of course. Yeah. I love podcasting, but what I see is that a lot of people just start a podcast to start a podcast. And that was definitely where I was a year and a half ago. I just want to have a podcast. I don't have any strategic plans with it. I just know that I'm meant to have a podcast. And it's adapted over time. And I've done all kinds of things. I've had people produce it for me. I've produced it myself. I've done pretty much every single piece of podcasting, and now I want to teach that. And what I have found is that podcasting is a tool and a platform for you to have more content. And especially for people that enjoy talking a lot more than writing, because I know a lot of people that I work with have a really hard time coming up with captions and like what to post and the strategy behind it. But if you start with a strategy with your podcast, then everything else just flows seamlessly. So I actually teach how to turn one podcast episode into at least 12 pieces of content for social media. So if you are producing at least one episode per week, you can turn that into at least 48 pieces of content, which covers, your whole month. So, and it makes it super easy and like a content machine.
Wow. So how do you do that? Like just little tidbits. Do you just
Cool.
transcript it? You take pieces out, you take little lessons and then break it down into Instagram posts, that kind of thing?
Exactly. So I actually have a formula. So you can record the episode live. So for example, if Tia and I wanted to record this episode live, we could do it in Zoom and stream it to Facebook. We could also do a dual live on Instagram. So that you can have a Facebook live and an Instagram live. That's 2. The podcast recording is 3. And then you can take the video from both the Facebook Live. You can make that a YouTube video, a LinkedIn video. You can repurpose it into an IGTV clip, Instagram story clips. You can transcribe it, turn it into a blog post. Then you can pull quotes from that transcription and make quote graphics. It's just like endless on what you can do with each episode.
Awesome. I love that. And do you usually go listen to it on your podcast?
Yeah, so I like to envision a podcast platform as kind of like a top of funnel. So the podcast is the free piece of value that you're providing to your clients, and everything points to your podcast. And then in each episode, you can strategically throw in your course, your membership site, whatever you're launching next, to join your team if you're in network marketing. If you're like, I have a lot of real estate agents that follow me because my background's in real estate, but if you want to have them schedule a listing appointment or anything like that, it's just a way to do that, and you can drive traffic that way. And it's very streamlined and simple.
Nice. Do you only cover a few topics? Do you keep it more niche? Like, what's your personal philosophy on that?
For my podcast?
Yeah, for your podcast.
Gotcha. Yeah. So whenever I started my podcast, I was like, I need to get my feet wet. and I need to get used to talking. Because before that, I really wasn't doing much on social media, like as Jordan, a business owner. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to get used to hearing my voice.
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
was so like a big thing to overcome. Because I don't know if y'all have ever listened to your own voice, but it's weird. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds so crazy. And I was like, okay, I have to get over the fact that I sound like a 7-year-old hillbilly and, like just keep on rolling because people are going to love me and the cute little things I say. And that's what I had to tell myself. So for me at first, it was getting my feet wet into this industry of online marketing and building a personal brand. And the way that I did that was I interviewed amazing people. So at first it was just local people. It was people in my area that I looked up to, like Kelly Rowland, who's one of your clients, people that I had met at my co-working space. And that's how I kind of got, how I eased into doing interviews. Because interviewing itself is a skill like altogether, like how to ask questions, how to keep the conversation going, how to direct it, how to like lead a conversation. Yeah. So that's where I kind of started. And then I realized that I really wanted to help female entrepreneurs feel empowered and inspired. So I sought after other entrepreneur women that had a story to tell, that were like, okay, I was here way back in the day, or, like 5 years ago, I was like, on a park bench. I'm just kidding. And how they like got to where they were today. Maybe like I've interviewed people that have marketing and Facebook ad agencies. I've interviewed the like owners of really, really successful companies. It just gave me a way to access really, really important people and to ask them all the questions. So, and by sharing their stories, I was able to establish my own credibility, and I was able to like kind of get mentored by like 60 different top coaches in our industry.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a secret sauce.
And it's so true because you're going to give them something so you can learn something. So most of the people I try to interview on something that I can learn from them. So right now I'm like, okay, she's all about podcasts. I know how to build podcasts and I know how to do all the grunt work, but now I'm trying to get how to grow it and get it to reach more people. So that's why I brought you on. And so I'm learning something from you, and then you probably learned something from me on your podcast.
Oh, for sure. It was amazing.
Yeah, so you guys will have to check it out. I'll actually put a link in this one.
Good idea.
Check yours out. So what is your biggest advice that you found for growing a podcast?
So I have a couple of things, but my biggest one is just take action. You guys, like, if I don't know, there's a lot of different sides of the spectrum. There's some people that are like me that are like, let's do it. It doesn't matter if I sneeze in the middle. Like, let's just go. And then there's the opposite side of the spectrum of people that are like super perfectionist, and they'll let that hold them back. They're like, I'm going to need to edit out every time I say or like or sneeze, or there's a pause or anything. And you guys, if you let things like that, like learning all the technology, if you let that hold you back, you'll never get started. So my advice is to be gentle on yourself and just do it. Like if it's on your heart, just do it and you'll figure it out along the way. And probably nobody listens to like my first episode, but I've come a long way.
Yeah, fancy is fun, but simple is done. So I actually don't edit most of my podcasts. I hate editing. And so I was like, I'm just going to go for it. Sometimes there's some mess ups, and sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to go find that mess up. I'm just going to put it out there. So you guys probably know that if you listen to my podcast, sometimes there's some birds chirping or neighbors doing weird sounds, or I mess up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to cut this out, and then I don't. So yes, definitely just start. And you get better as you go. You get so much better as you go.
For sure.
Awesome. So what is one of the things that helped you grow your podcast, like by advertising? Like, do you do YouTube videos? Do you share it more on your Instagram? Like, what specific tips have helped you reach more people?
For sure. So the secret sauce to reaching more people I believe, is having guests and really, really highlighting them and making them feel so special and creating content that they can share on their platform as well. And especially if you get a guest that has a big following. Not that that's everything, but you want to make sure that they have a very engaged following. And that's how I grew. I call it a podcast tour. You want to get on other people's podcasts and you want to have big guests on your podcast as well. For me, because every time you release that episode, they're going to share it on their social media and you're going to share it on yours. And it's just all this cross-pollination and it's just a win-win for everyone. And you actually get people in your audience that are aligned with you because they listen and they love your guests already. And if you're interviewing that person, 99% of the time, they're going to love you too. So it's just, I love the interviewing process and how it just like brings everyone together.
Yeah. For having your guests on there, what do you do to help them promote the podcast episode? So I've done like graphics. I have like special graphics. I tag them on my Instagram story. I share it. Sometimes I do the little link clips where you can hear a little bit of the podcast and I show it on my story or on my Instagram. And then I also do YouTube videos. So there's some tips for what I do to grow mine to reach more people. But what tips do you do for the speakers to promote your podcast?
For sure. Yeah, the way that I get them to do it is I always allow them to talk about whatever they're promoting. It's like, okay, you're on my podcast, but I want all of my listeners to know how to connect with you. I want them to know what you're offering right now so that they feel highlighted and like put on a pedestal. And also you have to make it simple.
Yeah.
You have to make it so simple. So I use a platform called Calendly. So whenever someone schedules a podcast with me, it has a set of questions. It's like, what's your name, your email, your phone number? What's a good address for me to send a thank you note? What is, go ahead and upload your bio and your headshot. And these are things that I'm always working on to improve. And whenever you do that, you capture their email. And then the next step, you guys, is to let them know when the podcast recording is. Like, say you scheduled a few weeks out. So send them reminders and be like, hey, our podcast is in a couple of days. Do you have any questions? And then the next step is to, whenever the podcast releases, let them know ahead of time, like, hey, our episode's coming out tomorrow. Here, I've already emailed you, like if you communicate on Instagram or something, like I've already emailed you all the graphics and shareables to make it easy. You just download it to your phone and share it on your Instagram and tag me and you'll be good to go. So my biggest tip is to make it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. That is definitely a huge tip for everything. So who has been one of your biggest podcast guests?
Oh, goodness.
Or favorite? Yeah, I would say biggest.
So, man, I've had some big ones. So one of the recent big ones was the founder of Primally Pure, which is a non-toxic skincare company, and really household items too. But she was really, and I get so geeked out on this, you guys. So she was on my podcast, but I actually found out about her because she was on Jenna Kutcher's podcast.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm one step away from Jenna Kutcher. Like literally, I'm one person away from someone who has talked to Jenna Kutcher.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. And they actually, her assistant actually reached out to me to be on my podcast. I was like, I told my husband, I was like, I have made it. I've made it in the world. A CEO of a major company reached out to me to be on my podcast. I was like, I'm done. Like,
Love
done.
it.
And it was a fantastic episode. But before that, one of my biggest ones was my mentor, Kayla Kraft, who is the head of Mommy Millionaire. I think she actually lives in your same town.
Oh, cool.
She lives in Newport Beach, or somewhere around in there. And I was in her mastermind, and so that is how I got her on my podcast, because it was like, you're my anyone who's in my mastermind, like, I'll do anything for you. And I was like, will you be on my podcast?
Yeah.
She's like, I sure will. So it definitely pays to like join masterminds of top players. And one thing that I want to add is like, whenever I know like going to personal development events is like really big in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys, like, if I'm going to an event, you best believe I'm going to walk out of there with like 15 podcast guests.
There you
Like,
go. Perfect.
I am still interviewing people that I met at an event in October. Like, I just had, it's like an unlimited pool. And you guys, when you go to these events, that you have to network. You can't just like go and listen and just sit there. So all the speakers at that event have been on my podcast. And so I just walked right up to them and was like, hey, I have a podcast. Your speech was amazing. Like, will you be on my podcast? And they're like, yep. Was that terrifying? Yes. Did I do it? Yes.
Awesome. That's great. How do you reach out to, podcast guests that are a lot above you? Like, do you have any tips, tricks? What do you do?
Oh, good. This is a whole thing in itself. Such a great question. I was like, there's two different things. Reaching out to people for them to be on your podcast and pitching yourself to be on their podcast.
Yeah.
It's definitely a dance. And let's start with first getting someone to be on your podcast as a guest. What you need to do is you really need to stalk them, basically, on social media. If they have a podcast, you need to listen to it. If they have social media, you need to be on it, engaging, liking, commenting. Show them that you actually love their stuff. Kind of court them and date them and say like, hey, I see you. I love your content. We are aligned.
Yes. Oh no, it paused. It's paused. Let's see, 12:44, 18. Okay, so. Okay. There we go.
Sorry about that.
So you were just right. You should stalk them. And then I think you cut out right there.
Okay, so whenever you want to have someone on your podcast, you need to stalk them. If they have a podcast, you need to listen to it. Take a screenshot of it and share it and tag them. And that way they can see like, okay, this girl's listening to my podcast. And then if they don't have a podcast, what you can do is watch their social media, engage, do comments on every single one of their posts that's 4 words or more. Not like, cute outfit, girl. They'll be like, oh my gosh, yes, I totally believe in money mindset too. These are the ways that I incorporate it into my life. Just really engage. And you can send a DM and be like, thank you so much for, sharing this content. Like, it really aligns with me. Then that way, whenever you go in for the big ask, it's like a no-brainer. They're like, yeah, of course I'll be on your podcast. Like, I would love to.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of that, pitching yourself to be on a podcast, I do it 2 different ways. So if someone has a podcast, I offer to do a pod swap, which is basically what Tia and I are doing right now. It's like tit for tat. Like, you can be on mine, I can be on yours. Like, it's great. And most people love that.
Yeah.
Most people, I've only had that go south like 1 time. And it was just because I didn't really get to know the person first, or I really didn't engage with their content first. I kind of misread the vibe.
You guys, you gotta check their stuff. I just want to re-highlight that is when people reach out to me and they haven't listened to my podcast, or like they want to be on my podcast without even liking or following or like showing me that they actually care. It just comes off like you just like, I don't know you. And well, I don't know. Yeah. You got to listen to my podcast because I don't want it scripted. Yeah. So that's so important.
Yeah. I get emails every single day of someone's assistant pitching me to be on my podcast. And I don't even read them, y'all. And I know that sounds terrible, but
no.
It's a copy
So,
and pasted email, and I just cannot handle it. And so I actually had one girl that it was an assistant that was emailing me, and she'd emailed me like 4 times in a row. And I was like, hey, thank you so much for reaching out. Like, I'm taking a break from guests, because I was at the time, because I had so many racked up. Like, I was weeks and weeks out of launching podcasts. And I just don't think that's fair to
yeah.
guests to like have to wait 2 months for their episode to release, because probably whatever they're promoting will already be out, you know?
Yeah.
So it was this one girl, and she was like, my friend Emily would love to be on your podcast. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not. After like 4 emails, I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm not accepting any more guests. And then she came back and she was like, actually, you've already scheduled a podcast with her. And I was like, what? So I went on my Instagram, and my friend Emily reached out to me on Instagram. And she was like, girl, and I could tell she had watched my IGTVs. She was like, I love it when you talked about this. I love it when you shared that. We have so much in common. I would love to be on your podcast. And I was like, yeah, girl, here's my link. Let's get it scheduled. Because she tried, and it was personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do that for other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Everybody research, make sure. And then also, if you have your own podcast, make sure you like their stuff. I've actually gotten a few people on without kind of really going in deep dive of what they sound like at the beginning. And I was like, well, that was kind of a boring podcast. You probably never heard it. It's probably out there. I don't know.
I've had some bad ones too, where I was like, ooh, I'm going to post it. If I interview someone, I release the episode.
Yeah.
Because that's time out of their day. I actually had one instance where I was on someone else's podcast and they never released the episode.
Yeah, I've actually had a couple.
I was mind blown.
Yeah.
I was like, I took out an hour of my day, and then I was like, well, what happened? You know, because I reached out and I was like, hey, girl, is our episode ever going to come out? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, like, is there
why?
a reason? Like, I was like, not trying to like nicely dig, and I was like, and she was like, no, it's all good. I was like, okay, like,
it's all good.
Like, did I say something? Like, is it my fault? Like, what? And she's like, no, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm like, okay, well, why in the world are you not releasing my episode? And I didn't want to be like that, but I was like, what happened? You know, like, I thought it was a really great episode. And I was like, well, would you like to reschedule? She was like, no. Like, okay, alrighty then. And so, but you guys, like, there's a point in time in my life where I would have just like been crushed by that. Yeah. Like, oh my God, she didn't like me. I said something bad. Da, da, da. I was like, you know what? It probably just doesn't align with what she's doing right now. Yeah. And that's okay. It's not about me. Yeah, it's not about me.
It's okay. Yeah, it's not about you. That's good to remember. But people, like, let people know why. I actually asked one of mine, and she was like, oh, I'm not really focusing on that, what we recorded back then. My business has shifted. I'm like, okay, like, that makes sense. And then the only one I didn't ever post, there's actually 2. One of them I can't find, and I may post it if I can find it. I got a new computer. And then the other one was, we had so many issues with the sound. I just did not want to go back and edit it. And I said we could record a new one, but it was like constant. There was this beeping. There was this other thing. And you guys let me know maybe in the comments, like, if you care to have beeping and all these sounds. But I don't know what was going on. I have no idea. I still loved the content, so maybe I could still share it, but it just bothered me, and so I never did.
I understand that. Horror story, I actually lost 3 episodes. Mm-hmm. And you guys, losing podcast episodes with guests I was like, my world is crashing around me. Like, I felt so awful. But, you know, as a business owner, you have to step up and you have to say, hey, I had an issue with my computer. I lost your episode. Would you like to reschedule? And I had one person that was very angry with me because she was on maternity leave. And she was like, I took time away from my baby to be on your podcast. I was like, I am so unbelievably sorry. Like, this is an honest mistake. I don't know. And I asked her if she'd be open to rescheduling. She was like, no. And you
Mm-mm.
guys, stuff like that happens. You can't control it. Excuse me, but shit's gonna happen. Okay. But you have to step up and own it. And the other two, I actually did re-record one, but the other two people that I lost, I reached out to them, was like, hey, I have terrible news. I have lost your recording. Like, would you be open to doing it again? And they were both like, yes, no problem. Happens all the time. This one will be better, you know.
Yeah.
So it was like 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. I've lost one that I found later and I was like, oh, never mind, I found it, but they were fine. And yeah, there's shit happens. It does. And it just does, especially when you're an entrepreneur. You never know what's going to happen. If the sound, like, I don't know if you guys just heard, but there was ambulances going on by and whatever. I'm a human.
Yeah, no, that's such a huge thing to remember, is like, we are all human. There's going to be a dog barking. There's going to be, and you just have to like let it go and realize that the content that you're providing is more important than the quality of the sound. Like, people really just don't care.
Yeah. I still listen to, for the most part, if there's a little bit of issues or not the best sound, then it's fine. But sound quality is important for podcasts.
Yes. That's why we have these nice microphones.
Yes. Okay. So let's see. I think we covered a good amount. I have lots of tips. You guys should definitely be making notes. Where can they find you?
Okay, great question. So I love to hang out on Instagram. I am on Instagram every single day. I make time every day to engage and respond to direct messages and really provide value in my stories and my content. That is where I love to show up the most. And my handle is Jordan English Official. I have a fun story about my Instagram. I actually had an Instagram that had around 12,000 followers, and I left it to create a brand new Instagram. So just goes to show you, whenever you look at someone's Instagram and you look at their followers, like, just know that that's not a measurement of how awesome the person is. You know,
At
like,
all.
if they have 100,000, like, you don't ever know. It also doesn't equal dollar bills in your bank account. I'll just tell you that right now.
At all. I actually wanted to do a podcast on that. I really wanted to find somebody to just riff on that, because it's just so true. I've met people with just a few thousand that they make a ton of money. I've met people with hundreds of thousands and they make no dollars. Or like, because I'm a coach, so I have people come to me and they don't make any money and they have 13,000 followers. Or one of my clients had 7,000 followers and she was struggling to make just a few hundred. But then when I taught her how to build a business based on her, based all around her target audience, her passion, her engagement not her engagement, the likes went down and the followers went down, but she was making more money. Mm-hmm. Because it was more targeted, because it was more clear, because it was what she was really wanting to do. So it has nothing to do with the likes and the followers. My business that has, well, it used to have 10,000, now it's a little bit under. It was bought followers, and the engagement sucks and it's up and down. So
yeah, that was mine too. I got roped into a follow loop, and that's how it happened. And I just, like, every time I would go live, it would be like these weird dudes from Morocco asking to see my feet. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I did start a brand new Instagram, and it is Jordan English Official. And I'm working very hard to build it back up and to provide tons of valuable content every day and really be authentic and show you what it's like to, like, be a mom of two and a wife and a business owner and all the things.
Yes, I love it. So go check her out. Also, are you launching anything? You said you have like a podcast thing. Share it for sure.
Oh, thank you so much for that opportunity. Yeah, so I am hosting a podcast workshop. It is at launchyourpodcast.co/workshop. And I go over the 4 steps of how to launch your podcast and how to turn it into a content machine. And those 4 steps are plan, purpose, produce and promote. So I like break it all down to where it's super simple and easy, and it's very interactive, and it will be a resource for you to go in and watch anytime.
Awesome. And that link will be in the bio just in case you didn't catch it. And go check it out. I wish I did a small course. It's a really good price too. So go check it out. You'll save yourself time. I've had a, podcast for a year and a half now. And I wish I would have taken some, shortcuts to get more followers and to learn from someone who's already been there. So go check it out. And thank you so much for being on my podcast. Did you have any last tips to share?
One other thing, thank you so much again for having me. One other thing is, just like followers on Instagram do not equal dollars in your bank account, the number of downloads you have on a podcast does not equal your bank account. So I never want anyone to measure their worth or their business by the amount of like downloads or listeners or followers on Instagram. Just always do things from your heart and do it authentically, just like Tia teaches.
Yeah, you guys, I don't have a ton of podcast listeners at this moment in time, but it's always on a growth slope, so that's good. And I always put more quality versus quantity, so I think that's a big thing. And if you guys want to help this podcast episode reach more people, definitely share it on your story and give us a good review. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So thank you, Tia.
Thank you.